Gordon Edwards is the director of the Canadian Coalition for Nuclear Responsibility. He has dedicated decades of his life to education and research on all issues related to nuclear energy, whether civilian or military. Gordon, you too have devoted your life to understanding and communicating the dangers of the nuclear fuel chain across Canada, from, from uranium mining to processing, refining, fuel fabrication, reactor operations, and nuclear waste handling. This latest push for SMNRs now brings with it a new and very serious problem, that of nuclear weapons proliferation. Can you tell us more about this and why we should be concerned?
Thank you very much, Angela. I came at this issue in the first place through nuclear weapons. An existential threat to the human race is the human race. And the reason why is because we've developed doomsday machines in the form of nuclear weapons, which are capable of destroying human civilization within a matter of hours. And the difficulty is that these arsenals still exist, and they're now being renewed. They're being refurbished and expanded, so that the threat of nuclear war, which is diminishing, which has been diminishing in recent decades, is on the verge of now becoming more pronounced. And it's coming to the point now where any nuclear war, as nuclear weapons spread around the world, any war can turn into a nuclear war. And once a nuclear war starts, it's extremely difficult to keep it limited. But even a limited nuclear war between two nuclear armed opponents, such as, for example, India and Pakistan, even a limited nuclear war involving only a few dozen nuclear weapons rather than the tens of thousands that exist, would cause climate change on a global scale very rapidly. That would make it very difficult for all life on Earth to actually produce enough food, to get enough sunlight, and to actually continue. So it's not only global warming that is an existential threat to the planet, human caused, but it's also these nuclear weapons. And that's where uranium and plutonium come in, because the very first nuclear reactors were built for one single purpose, and that was to produce the plutonium that's needed for nuclear weapons. And during the Cold War, there were tens of thousands of nuclear weapons built, and the primary nuclear explosive in these weapons is plutonium, which is a derivative of uranium and which has to be created. It doesn't exist in nature. It's only created inside a nuclear reactor, and it's created inside every nuclear reactor, whatever the purpose of that reactor may be. Moreover, plutonium has a half-life of 24,000 years, which means that after being created, it is virtually indestructible, and it will be around for tens of thousands of years to come. So we are creating, at every time we build a nuclear reactor, we're creating a repository of plutonium, something that nature did not provide us with, we are graciously providing. Now, unlike natural uranium, when you dig uranium out of the ground, you can't use it directly as a nuclear explosive material. For example, if somebody stole CANDU fuel bundles destined for a Canadian nuclear reactor, they couldn't make a bomb out of that. Because why? Because the explosive variety of uranium in nature is mixed with overwhelming amounts of non-explosive uranium. And as a result, the mixture can't be used. It has to be highly enriched, and that's a very difficult, sophisticated, and technologically enhanced and energy intensive process. It's something that only countries that have nuclear weapons, or usually countries that have some idea of maybe getting nuclear weapons, have that technology. Canada does not. But every reactor produces plutonium, and plutonium, when separated from the irradiated fuel, all plutonium can be used to make bombs. So that you don't need enrichment. You don't need anything but a chemical separation plant that is sufficiently shielded so that you can handle the intense radiation that is created by the high-level radioactive waste. People perhaps do not understand that even though a normal fuel bundle before it goes into the reactor can be handled safely with gloves, once it comes out of the reactor, it'll kill any human being in a matter of seconds because of a blast of gamma radiation coming from those that were mentioned by Brennan. What are these byproducts? They are the broken pieces of uranium and plutonium atoms that have been split. The energy of the atom is released by splitting the atoms. And when they're split, you get hundreds of broken pieces. And these broken pieces are millions of times more radioactive and lethal to even come close for any human being. And that's what protects the plutonium. The reason why right now it's not so easy to get the plutonium out and to use it for bombs is because it would kill any human being that comes close to it. So while this is done by superpowers and by nuclear armed other countries, in fact, the only country that extracts plutonium from spent fuel that doesn't have nuclear weapons is Japan. And that's highly controversial and nerve-wracking for the neighbors of Japan, because at any time, that separated plutonium can easily be incorporated into nuclear weapons. And so you can go from a stockpile of so-called civilian plutonium, and you can turn it into a nuclear arsenal in short order. So this was my main concern, and this is how I got involved in the nuclear question in the first place. And then I discovered that most of the early reactors in Canada, in the US, in Russia, in England, they were all dual purpose reactors. That is, while they were producing electricity, they were also producing plutonium for bombs. Here in Canada, even though we didn't have a bomb program, we sold plutonium from our research reactors at Chalk River for 30 years after 1945, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We sold our plutonium to the American military for bombs. At the same time, by the way, we were selling all of our uranium up until 1965 to the American military, specifically for weapons purposes. So Canada is not the innocent bystander that many people might think. In fact, we were part of the Manhattan Project. In 1943, there was a meeting between Winston Churchill, President Roosevelt, and our Prime Minister, Mackenzie King, to sign a tripartite secret agreement called the Quebec Accord. And this was an agreement to cooperate to develop the world's first nuclear weapons. And part of the agreement was that the weapons would not be used against each other, and they would not be used against a third party except by unanimous consent. So our Prime Minister had to consent to the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Now, Canadian uranium was used not only to build the Hiroshima bomb, which was made out of highly enriched uranium, but also the Nagasaki bomb, which was made from plutonium, because uranium is the feedstock to make the plutonium. So what we're now witnessing is that in its desperate effort to keep the ball rolling and keep the money rolling in, the nuclear industry is now proposing to extract plutonium from irradiated nuclear fuel that already exists. The problem with that is that as soon as you extract plutonium, and why do they want to do this? Because they say that we can use that plutonium as a fuel in place of the uranium. In fact, this is a dream that the nuclear industry has had for a long time. The idea of entering the golden age of the plutonium economy, where everything, the whole world, in fact, will be running on plutonium. This is a nightmarish prospect because that means that plutonium would become an article of commerce. It would become something that is traded and shipped around the world, and thousands of people would be aware of these shipments. It's inevitable that these will fall into the hands of criminals and then into the hands of terrorists, as well as into the hands of various nations which may not even have nuclear weapons or nuclear power. They can get a hold of this plutonium, and we're creating a nightmarish possibility for the world. In fact, much has been written about this, and you can Google the plutonium economy. The Harvard Law School printed a document years ago called Policing Plutonium, the Civil Liberties Fallout, in which they go into great detail about how this would fundamentally change society itself, because it means that you would have to have really a military dictatorship, because you couldn't afford to allow people to get their hands on this plutonium and then to be able to, well, as somebody once said in that context, we could wake up one morning and find Washington, D.C. gone and have no idea who did it. So this is a terrible possibility. And we in Canada, unfortunately, through misrepresentation by the nuclear proponents, are on the verge of, in fact, already our Canadian government has donated $50.5 million towards embarking upon plutonium extraction. It's crazy. And I just want to, I just want to end, if I have a couple of minutes, I just would like to make a parallel here. I don't know if everyone listening to this has read Lord of the Rings, but in the Lord of the Rings, there is a ring, a magic ring of great power. But the thing is that when you, and it's almost irresistible, that when you slip it on your finger, you think you're going to have these wonderful powers. For one thing, you become invisible. And, but you discover that the ring, in fact, possesses you. You don't possess the ring. And so you become the possessed, and the ring is the possessor. And in order to destroy the ring, they have to find the most humble people on earth, who are the halflings of Middle Earth, because they're the only ones who are able to resist the lure of the ring and are able to destroy it. I like to think of this as a sort of a parable for our time, in that it's the ordinary people that have to provide leadership in getting rid of this nuclear menace. And the way to get rid of it, because it's an addiction. It's an addiction, and the powers that be are in the thrall of this addiction. And we have to mobilize ourselves and lobby and act, just as we have to act together to save the planet from climate change. We have to act together also to save the planet from this nuclear nightmare. Thank you.